I found out my husband was cheating because he left his email open. My husband, Daniel, and I have been together for 5 years, and I always thought our relationship was solid. We had a comfortable life, no major issues, no red flags. We've always been busy with work, but we managed to make time for each other. Or so I thought. One morning, I was getting ready for work, and Daniel was already in the kitchen, having coffee. His laptop was open on the table, and his email was visible. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but for some reason, something made me look at the screen. The first thing I saw was a message from a woman named Jessica. It wasn't just a casual email. It was flirtatious, full of inside jokes, and ended with, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make it special." My heart dropped. I quickly minimized the email, hoping I was overreacting, but my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it again and went through the entire thread. The messages went back several months, talking about secret dates, trips, and intimate encounters. I felt sick to my stomach. My mind was racing. How could he do this to me? The man I trusted, my best friend, had been cheating on me for months and I didn't even know. When he went to the bathroom, I took a screenshot of the conversation and confronted him the second he came back. He was caught off guard, stuttering, and trying to deny it, but the evidence was right in front of him. He admitted everything. He had been seeing Jessica, a coworker, and they'd been having an affair for 6 months. He claimed it was a mistake and that he was sorry, but I couldn't hear any of it. My entire world had just fallen apart. I packed my bags and left that night. I couldn't look at him, couldn't even stand to be in the same room. He begged for another chance, but I couldn't trust him anymore. I'm still in the process of figuring out what's next, but one thing is certain, I'll never let my guard down the same way again. What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating this way? Would you give them a second chance? Or is this a betrayal that's impossible to forgive? I found out my husband was cheating when he left his Tinder open on our shared tablet. It all started when my husband, Greg, began acting strangely. He was distant, always on his phone, and started staying late at work more often. I tried to brush it off, thinking he was just stressed, but something didn't feel right. One evening, I was going through our shared tablet, looking for a recipe, when I noticed an unfamiliar app, Tinder. I wasn't the jealous type, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and there it was, Greg's profile, with pictures of him looking happy and carefree. His bio reading, "looking for some fun." My heart dropped. I scrolled through his messages, seeing conversations with multiple women. He was talking to them as if we were strangers, arranging meetups, and even sending explicit photos. My stomach turned. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me like this? I confronted him as soon as he came home. At first, he denied everything, but when I showed him the screenshots, he broke down. He admitted he'd been using Tinder for months, hooking up with women while I was at home, clueless. His excuses? It was just for fun. I was feeling bored, and I never thought it would go this far. I didn't know what to feel. I had loved him with everything I had, and here he was, admitting to cheating with strangers behind my back. It was too much. I kicked him out of the house that night, and we haven't spoken since. The hardest part isn't just the betrayal, it's the fact that he was living a secret life while pretending everything was fine. He never gave me any indication that something was wrong. I've spent the past few weeks trying to move on, but it's hard. I trusted him completely, and now I feel like I've been living in a lie. Would you ever be able to forgive a betrayal like this? Or is cheating a deal breaker in your book? I caught my husband cheating at his own birthday party. It was supposed to be a fun celebration. My husband, Ethan, and I had been married for years, and I thought we had a solid relationship. I'd been planning his surprise birthday party for months. Everything was perfect. We invited friends and family, rented out a beautiful venue, and I was so excited to see him smile. But things took a turn I never expected. Throughout the night, Ethan seemed distracted. He was constantly checking his phone and stepping away to take calls. At first, I thought maybe he was just overwhelmed by the party. But as the evening wore on, I noticed something more suspicious. He kept sneaking off with his best friend, Mike, and when they weren't together, Ethan would go outside for long periods. Around PM, when everyone was enjoying cake and drinks, I decided to step outside for some fresh air. I walked past the back of the venue and froze in my tracks. Ethan and a woman I didn't recognize were standing by a car, laughing and holding hands. My heart sank as I watched them kiss. I didn't know what to do. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I knew this was it. My husband was cheating on me. I walked back inside, my mind racing. I couldn't face him right then, so I waited until the party started winding down. When the guests started leaving, I confronted him. He tried to deny it, but when I showed him the picture I took of them kissing, he broke down. Ethan admitted he'd been seeing this woman for the past 6 months, and he didn't know how to tell me. His excuse? It was a mistake, but there's no excuse for cheating. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and heartbroken. The man I thought I could trust had been lying to my face the whole time. I left the party without him. I told him we were done. Now, I'm left picking up the pieces of my shattered life. I'm still in shock that it all went down like this on his own birthday, no less. It's hard to trust anyone after this, and I don't know where to go from here. If you were in my shoes, would you have confronted him right then and there, or would you have waited until you had more evidence? I caught my boyfriend cheating because he accidentally left his Spotify open. It's funny how a small thing can uncover a huge betrayal. My boyfriend, Jason, and I had been together for 2 years. We lived together, had similar interests, and everything seemed perfect, or at least, I thought it was. It all started on a lazy Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Jason left his laptop open on the kitchen table. I didn't think anything of it until I noticed his Spotify account was still logged in. I was never one to snoop, but I couldn't help but glance at his recent listens. That's when I saw it. There were songs on his playlist that didn't make sense, tracks I had never heard of, and they were all by a woman I didn't know. The titles were suggestive, almost like love songs. My heart started racing. I clicked on the profile of the artist, and there she was, a beautiful blonde woman, with a profile picture of her lounging in a bikini. Curious and more than a little suspicious, I clicked on some of her songs. What I found next made my blood run cold. In the song descriptions, she mentioned things like our secret nights together and can't wait for you to hold me again. I felt sick to my stomach. Jason had been seeing her, and I had no idea. When Jason came back, I confronted him. At first, he tried to brush it off as nothing, just a few songs he liked. But when I showed him the messages in the artist's bio, he knew he was caught. He admitted everything. He had been seeing her for months. He said he never meant for it to happen, but his actions spoke for themselves. I didn't know what to say. I had trusted him completely, and now I felt like I didn't know who he really was. I packed my things that night and left. I didn't want to waste another minute with someone who had so little respect for me. I still can't believe it all started with a random glance at his Spotify account. Sometimes it's the smallest things that reveal the biggest truths. Would you ever check something like that? Or would you just trust your partner until the end?
I found out my girlfriend was cheating with my best friend because of a shared calendar app. I never thought this would happen to me. My girlfriend, Emily, and I had been together for almost 3 years. We had a great relationship, honest, loving, and we shared everything. Or so I thought. We even synced our calendars so we could plan things together, from work meetings to date nights. It all started a few weeks ago, when I noticed some strange events showing up on my shared calendar. There were dates I didn't remember, scheduling, random appointments that Emily had added, but they didn't seem like something she'd normally do. At first, I dismissed it as nothing, but then I saw a recurring entry titled Date Night with Ben. Ben, my best friend. I froze. I knew I had to be mistaken, so I asked Emily about it. She brushed it off and said it was a work event she'd added by mistake. But my gut told me something was off. I decided to check the calendar again. There were more entries: dinner with Ben, weekend getaway with Ben, late night talks with Ben. They were scattered across the past few months. That night, I decided to follow them. I called Ben to ask if he wanted to grab a drink and catch up. He sounded off, like he was avoiding me, but agreed. When I met him, I could see something was wrong. He was acting distant, shifting his eyes nervously, and trying to keep the conversation light. I finally confronted him. I told him I knew about the dates he'd been having with Emily, and that's when it all came crashing down. He didn't deny it. In fact, he confessed. He and Emily had been secretly seeing each other for months. They had been meeting up while I thought everything was fine, and they had kept it hidden by using our shared calendar app as their secret code. I felt betrayed beyond words. Not only had Emily lied to me, but my best friend, the person I trusted the most, had been sneaking around behind my back. I couldn't even look at either of them. I ended things with both of them that night. I didn't want anything to do with people who would hurt me like this. The hardest part is knowing I'll never be able to see either of them the same way again. Has anyone else caught their partner cheating in such a bizarre way? How do you ever trust anyone again after something like this?
I caught my fiancé cheating with my best friend at my engagement party. Everything seemed perfect. My fiancé and I had been together for 5 years, and last weekend, we threw an engagement party to celebrate our upcoming wedding. Friends and family were there. The venue looked stunning, and I was so excited about the future. Little did I know, my world was about to shatter. Toward the end of the night, I noticed my best friend, Sarah, and my fiancé, Jake, had been sneaking off together a lot. At first, I brushed it off, maybe they were coordinating something special for me. But then, I saw it. Sarah whispered something to Jake, and they both left the room together. Curious and a little uneasy, I decided to follow them. They went upstairs to one of the private rooms at the venue. I hesitated, thinking I was overreacting, but something told me to open the door. What I saw left me frozen. My fiancé and my best friend were making out at my engagement party. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at the two people I trusted most betraying me in the worst possible way. When they finally noticed me, Jake stuttered something about how it wasn't what it looked like, while Sarah just started crying. I calmly walked back downstairs, picked up the microphone, and announced to everyone, "Thank you for coming, but this engagement is over." Turns out my fiancé and my best friend decided to hook up tonight instead of celebrating with us. Gasps and whispers filled the room as I grabbed my stuff and left. Jake and Sarah have been blowing up my phone, begging for forgiveness, but I blocked them both. I've called off the wedding and cut Sarah out of my life. Part of me feels numb, but the other part, relieved. Better to find out now than after the wedding, right? I found out my husband had a secret family. After 10 years of marriage, for a decade, I thought I had the perfect life. My husband, Matt, and I had built a beautiful home together, and we have two amazing kids. He worked hard, often traveling for business, while I stayed home to manage everything. Or so I thought. One evening, Matt left his phone on the counter while he showered. A message popped up from someone named Lisa. It read, "Are you coming home to the kids tonight?" My heart sank. I didn't recognize the name, and I definitely didn't know what she meant by the kids. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the thread. What I found shattered my entire world. There were photos of Matt with another woman and two small children, a boy and a girl who looked just like him. They had gone on trips together, celebrated birthdays, and even spent holidays as a family. It wasn't just an affair, he had an entire other life. I confronted him that night. At first, he denied everything, but when I showed him the messages, he broke down. He admitted that Lisa was his other wife, and they had been together for 6 years. He claimed he didn't know how to tell me because he loved us both. I was livid. I couldn't believe he had been living this double life while lying to me and our kids. He spent half of his business trips with them, using fake work schedules to cover his tracks. I packed his bags and told him to leave. He begged me to stay together, for the kids. But how could I ever trust him again? Now, I'm trying to rebuild my life while navigating the mess he left behind. Would you be able to forgive something like this? Or is it an automatic deal breaker?
My wife cheated and got pregnant, but that's not even the worst part. My wife, Anna, and I had been married for 7 years, and I thought our relationship was solid. We had our ups and downs, but we always worked through things. Or so I thought. About 6 months ago, I noticed she started acting differently. She was constantly on her phone, staying out late, and being weirdly secretive. When I confronted her, she brushed it off as work stress and told me I was overthinking things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Fast forward to last week. Anna sat me down and told me she was pregnant. At first, I was thrilled. We had been talking about starting a family, so this felt like a dream come true, until she started crying. That's when she dropped the bombshell. The baby might not be mine. She admitted she had been seeing someone else for months. It was a coworker from her office, and their fling had gone further than she ever intended. Now, she's pregnant and has no idea who the father is. I was devastated. I couldn't believe the woman I loved and trusted would do this to me. But here's the kicker. She wants me to stay and raise the baby, regardless of the paternity results. Her reasoning? You're my husband, and you love me. This is just a mistake. I feel torn. Part of me still loves her, but the betrayal runs so deep. And what if the baby isn't mine? I can't stop replaying the past few months in my head, wondering how I missed the signs. I'm waiting for the paternity test results, but I don't even know if I'll be able to stay with her after everything. What would you do in my situation? Stay and try to work it out, or walk away for good? I found out my girlfriend was cheating, thanks to her pet parrot. My girlfriend, Laura, and I had been together for 2 years. She's funny, beautiful, and smart, and she had a quirky pet parrot named Charlie that I absolutely adored. Charlie was talkative and always repeating things Laura would say, which was usually cute, until it wasn't. About a month ago, I started noticing Laura acting strange. She was glued to her phone, always smiling at messages, and started making excuses to go out alone. When I asked her about it, she accused me of being paranoid. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Then Charlie started saying something new. He'd squawk, "Oh, baby, you're so sexy," and "I can't wait to see you tonight." I laughed it off at first, thinking Laura must have been watching some cheesy rom-com. But then Charlie said, "Mark, don't tell him." Mark? I didn't know anyone named Mark. The pit in my stomach grew, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So, I started paying more attention. Laura kept being secretive, taking phone calls in the other room, and brushing me off when I asked who she was talking to. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One day, while Laura was out running errands, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked her tablet, which was synced to her phone. Sure enough, there were texts between her and someone named Mark. Explicit messages, flirty photos, and plans to meet up when she told me she was working late. When she got home, I confronted her, and she broke down, admitting she'd been seeing Mark for 3 months. She tried to apologize, saying it was just a mistake, but I couldn't forgive her. The betrayal hurt too much, and the fact that her own parrot had outed her made it almost surreal. I packed my things and left that night. Laura begged me to stay, but I couldn't. As for Charlie, I kinda missed the little guy, but I'll never forget how he accidentally saved me from wasting more time in a relationship built on lies. Would you ever listen to a hunch like this, or would you need more proof before walking away? My wife cheated with my brother, and I found out during a family barbecue. I never saw it coming. My wife, Rachel, and I were married for 6 years. We had a good life, good jobs, a nice house, and everything seemed perfect on the outside. I always trusted her completely, never doubting her loyalty. But I should have known something was off when she started getting distant. It started with small things. She became less affectionate. Her texts and calls were more secretive, and she started spending more time at work. But I didn't want to be that guy who jumps to conclusions, so I'll let it slide. However, it got harder to ignore when she insisted on taking girls' nights out every weekend. Then came the family barbecue. It was supposed to be a fun day with family, and everything was going great at first. I was hanging out with my cousins, grilling some burgers, while Rachel was talking to my brother, Adam. I noticed they were laughing a little too much, getting a bit too close, but I brushed it off. It was nothing, right? It wasn't until the party started, winding down, that I realized something wasn't right. I went inside to grab a drink and heard voices in the guest room. I thought it was just Rachel talking on the phone, but then I heard my brother's voice dash, "Can't believe we're doing this. What if he finds out?" I froze. I didn't want to believe what was hearing, but I couldn't deny it. I pushed the door open just a crack, and what I saw turned my world upside down. Rachel and Adam were tangled in a passionate kiss on the bed. My heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't even speak. I slammed the door open, and they both jumped back, looking completely caught. Rachel was crying. Adam was stammering. And I stood there in total disbelief. Rachel confessed she'd been cheating on me with my brother for almost a year, saying it was a weak moment that turned into something more. I felt like my whole life was a lie. I confronted both of them, and Adam tried to apologize, but all I could hear was the sound of my heart breaking. I told Rachel to leave and that I was cutting all ties with Adam. I felt like my whole life was a lie. I confronted both of them, and Adam tried to apologize, but all I could hear was the sound of my heart breaking. I told Rachel to leave and that I was cutting all ties with Adam. I'm still processing everything. How could the two people I trusted most betray me like that? The worst part? They were both in my life for years, and I never saw the signs. Would you ever be able to forgive a betrayal like that? Or is it something you can't come back from? My fiancée cheated on me with my maid of honor, and they got pregnant. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. My fiancée, Sophie, and I had been planning our wedding for months. We'd been together for 3 years, and I honestly thought she was the one. Everything seemed perfect until my maid of honor, Mia, started acting weird. At first, it was subtle. Mia, who had always been my best friend, started pulling away from the wedding planning, making excuses for why she couldn't help with certain tasks. Sophie was busy too, but I figured she was just overwhelmed. Then, things started getting more noticeable. Sophie was always on her phone, texting in private, and she started going out more without telling me where. I tried to be understanding, but something didn't feel right. One night, I came home early from a friend's party, and Sophie's car was in the driveway. I expected to see her inside, maybe with Mia, planning the last details of the wedding. Instead, when I walked in, I saw them both in the living room, talking in hushed voices, looking guilty. I didn't think much of it at first, just thinking they were gossiping about wedding stuff. But then I heard Sophie say, "We can't keep this a secret anymore." My heart skipped a beat. What secret? I sat down and demanded answers. Mia broke down first, confessing that she and Sophie had been having an affair for months. They had been sneaking around behind my back, and the worst part? Sophie was pregnant, and it was Mia's baby. I couldn't breathe. The two people I trusted most in the world had been betraying me the entire time. Sophie was crying, apologizing, but I couldn't hear her. I couldn't even process what she was saying. All I could think about was how my entire future had just been ripped away. I kicked them both out. Sophie begged me to stay, saying the pregnancy didn't change how she felt about me, but I couldn't even look at her. I canceled the wedding and blocked both of them. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs sooner. It's been months now, and I'm still struggling to move on. I don't know what's worse, the betrayal, the fact that they had a baby together, or the constant reminder of it all whenever I see Mia's face. Would you be able to forgive someone who did something like this? Or is this a deal breaker for good?
My husband's business trip was a honeymoon for to just not with me. For the past few months, my husband, Ryan, had been traveling more than usual. He works in sales, so it wasn't out of the ordinary. But something about his recent business trips felt off. His stories didn't quite add up. His schedule was suddenly unpredictable, and he started guarding his phone like it was the crown jewels. The final straw came when I found a crumpled receipt in his coat pocket after his most recent trip. It was for a luxury resort in Cancun. We hadn't been to Cancun or anywhere remotely tropical for years. I confronted him about it, but he waved it off with, "It's for a client event. You wouldn't understand." But I couldn't let it go. I logged into our shared credit card account that night and found transactions for spa treatments, candlelit dinners, and even a couple's massage. My heart sank, but I needed proof. So I did what I'd never done before. I hacked into his email. That's when I found the itinerary. Ryan hadn't been on a business trip, he'd been on a week-long getaway with Sophie, his co-worker. The confirmation email even included a note saying, "Looking forward to our romantic escape, my love." I was livid, but instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to play the long game. The next day, I called his office pretending to be a prospective client and asked to speak to Sophie. The receptionist mentioned Sophie was out of the office for the week, Bingo. So, I printed everything, the receipts, the itinerary, even screenshots of their flirty emails, and tucked them into an envelope. That night, while Ryan was in the shower, I slipped the envelope into his briefcase, along with a note that said, "Business or pleasure, I'm done." When he came out of the bathroom, I was already packing my bags. He saw the suitcase and started to panic. But before he could say a word, I pointed to his briefcase. "Check your notes for tomorrow's meeting," I said with a smirk before walking out. Ryan blew up my phone for days, begging me to come back, but I've already filed for divorce. As for Sophie, she can have him. If he could cheat on his wife, I have no doubt he'll cheat on her too. I may have lost a marriage, but I gained something better: freedom. The party I wasn't invited to was the one where my husband betrayed me. I never thought I'd be the type of person who would get cheated on. My husband, David, and I have been together for 5 years, and we've always had a good relationship, at least I thought we did. Recently, though, I started noticing little things. He'd be on his phone more often, acting strangely when I asked about his day, and even his social media activity seemed off. But it was the party that did me in. David told me about a work event his company was throwing last Friday night. He mentioned it casually, like it was no big deal. At first, I didn't think much of it, but something nagged at me all week. He never once mentioned who would be there, and when I asked, he brushed it off, saying it was just some colleagues. As the evening wore on, I started getting texts from mutual friends asking where I was. They were all at a party that David had apparently forgotten to mention. I felt a stab of suspicion, so I did what any sane person would do: I checked his Instagram. What I saw made my blood run cold. David had posted a picture of himself, with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, captioned, "Great night with amazing people." It wasn't just the photo that struck me, it was the chemistry between them. She was smiling up at him in a way that sent a chill down my spine. I was already upset, but when I saw that someone had tagged him in a story from the party, I knew I had to go. I threw on my coat, grabbed my keys, and drove to the venue, which was just a few miles away. I parked a little down the street and walked quietly up to the front door. I peered through the window and saw David, laughing and leaning in to kiss the same woman in the Instagram post. My stomach dropped to my feet. I didn't make a scene, at least, not at first. I backed away from the window and made my way back to my car. I called him, and when he picked up, I said, "You need to come home now. You're done." "Babe, what are you talking about?" he asked, sounding confused. "Get your ass home, David, now." He knew I was serious, and within minutes, he was walking through the door. I didn't give him a chance to speak. I held up my phone with the Instagram post on display. "That's you," I said flatly, "and that's her. So tell me, was this part of your work event too?" His face went pale, and he immediately began apologizing. He said it wasn't what it looked like and that it was just a moment of weakness. He tried to explain it away, but I didn't care. The trust was shattered, and the truth was clear. I told him to leave, and as he packed his things, he kept begging for another chance. But the betrayal was too much for me to forgive. I filed for divorce a few days later. David can keep his work events and his flirty coworkers. As for me, I'm done being someone's. I found out my best friend was sleeping with my boyfriend, and I never saw it coming. I thought I knew everything about my boyfriend, Eric, and my best friend, Lacey. We'd all been close for years. But recently, Eric had started acting distant, and Lacey was unusually protective of him. I didn't think much of it at first, but that changed when I went out of town for a few days. I decided to surprise Eric with a romantic evening before I left. But when I came back into the living room, I noticed Lacey's phone on the coffee table. A text from Eric lit up the screen saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. You're everything I need." I scrolled through their conversation, and what I found took my breath away. It wasn't just a flirtation, they'd been sending explicit photos and love notes to each other. Shocked, I waited until Lacey came over the next day, acting normal. Finally, I asked, "So, you and Eric, huh?" She went pale when I showed her the texts. She apologized, saying it just happened and that she never meant to hurt me. But the damage was done. When Eric came over, he tried to deny it, but the truth was clear. I ended things with him on the spot and told Lacey I couldn't be friends with her anymore either. It's been a few weeks now. I've cut both of them out of my life, and while it hurts, I know I deserve better. I walked in on my husband's poker night and uncovered the truth. I used to think my husband, Ben, was perfect. We'd been married for 6 years, and while things weren't as exciting as they used to be, I chalked it up to the natural progression of marriage. Every Friday night, Ben had a tradition, poker night with the guys. I'd never questioned it. He'd come home smelling like beer, sometimes with a pizza box in tow, and I figured he deserved his downtime. Last Friday, something felt off. Ben had been unusually distant all week, glued to his phone and brushing off my questions with short answers. When Friday rolled around, he kissed me on the cheek like usual and said, "Don't wait up, babe." But instead of relaxing at home like I normally would, I decided to swing by the house of his friend, Elliot, where poker night was supposedly happening. When I pulled into Elliot's driveway, it was eerily quiet. No cars, no laughter, no sign of the guys hanging out. My stomach churned as I checked my phone. Ben had sent me a message an hour ago saying, "Game's getting intense." Something wasn't right. I drove back home, parking a few houses away so Ben wouldn't notice if he came back. As I approached our house, I saw the lights were on, and shadows moved across the living room curtains. My heart pounded as I unlocked the door as quietly as possible. The sight that greeted me was like a gut punch. Ben wasn't playing poker. He was on the couch, tangled up with Leela, a woman I'd introduced him to at one of my work events months ago. Her shirt was on the floor, and they were so caught up in each other they didn't even notice me standing there. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat as my hands shook. Finally, I managed to choke out, "So this is poker night." They froze. Leela scrambled to grab her shirt, stammering something about how this isn't what it looks like, while Ben just stared at me, wide-eyed and speechless. The silence that followed was unbearable. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Ben tried calling me over and over, but I ignored every call. Instead, I drove to my sister's house and told her everything. The worst part? Leela had the audacity to text me later, saying, "It's not fair to blame me. You clearly weren't giving him what he needed." It's been a week since that night, and I'm staying with my sister while I figure out my next steps. I've filed for divorce, and I'm cutting Ben and Leela out of my life for good. The betrayal still stings, but I refuse to let their actions define my future. Cheaters may think they've won, but they'll never get the best of me. He left his phone at home, and now I know everything. I've always trusted my boyfriend, Mark. We'd been together for 2 years, and while he had a habit of being secretive with his phone, I never pushed. I believed his excuse of, "I just like my privacy." But last Saturday, fate had other plans. Mark left in a rush for a quick trip to the gym, and accidentally left his phone on the kitchen counter. I wasn't planning to snoop, but when a text from someone named Amber popped up saying, "I can't wait to see you again tonight," I froze. My hands started shaking as I unlocked his phone. He'd shown me his passcode months ago, probably thinking I'd never actually use it. What I found shattered me. Amber wasn't just a random contact. Their conversation was a long string of flirtatious texts, late night "I miss you" messages, and explicit photos. The timestamps showed they'd been meeting for months. I kept scrolling, heart pounding, until I stumbled upon a text from Amber saying, "You should tell her soon. She deserves to know." Tell me what? That he's been cheating? I didn't stop there. His gallery was full of pictures of the two of them, dinners, beach outings, even a selfie of them cuddling on what looked suspiciously like our couch. That was the breaking point. I knew I couldn't confront him without proof, so I forwarded the messages and photos to myself. Then, out of morbid curiosity, I opened his Instagram DMs. Big mistake. There were conversations with multiple women, each one worse than the last. Apparently, Mark had been living a double life while telling me I was his one and only. When he came back from the gym, I was sitting at the kitchen table, his phone in front of me. "Forget something?" I asked, holding up his phone. The look on his face was priceless. He stammered, "Why do you have my phone? Why does Amber have your heart?" I shot back, tossing the phone onto the table. His face went pale. He tried to deny it at first, saying Amber was just a friend. But when I started listing the names of all the other women he'd been messaging, he knew he was caught. He begged for forgiveness, claiming he didn't mean for it to happen and that he still loves me. I laughed in his face. "You don't love me. You love yourself." I packed my things that night and left. It's been a week since I walked away, and while it hurts, I'm relieved. Mark showed me who he really is, and I'll never settle for less than someone who truly values me. As for Amber, I sent her everything. Let her deal with his lies now. I cheated on my boyfriend with his best friend, and now I don't know what to do. So, this is really hard to admit, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. I 25F have been with my boyfriend, Jake 27M, for almost 3 years. Our relationship has had its ups and downs, but we've always been pretty solid. That was until his best friend, Mark 28M, came back into town. Mark and I have always had a weird dynamic. We'd joke around, tease each other, and there was always a bit of a flirtatious energy between us. But it never really crossed the line until recently. A few weeks ago, Jake and I were going through a rough patch. He had been busy with work, and I felt completely neglected. I tried to talk to him about it, but he was distant and uninterested. During that time, Mark reached out to me more often. We started hanging out more, going out for drinks, and just spending time together. It wasn't anything crazy at first, just catching up and talking about life. One night, we ended up at Mark's apartment after a few too many drinks. Things escalated quickly, and we ended up hooking up. The guilt hit me immediately, but it didn't stop there. We saw each other a few more times after that. I kept telling myself it was just a mistake, but deep down, I knew what I was doing was wrong. The worst part? Jake had no idea. He trusted me completely, and here I was, betraying him with his best friend. Eventually, Mark and I started having some serious conversations about the situation. He told me that he didn't want to be the one to ruin my relationship, but he had feelings for me, and he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened between us. I felt trapped. On one hand, I still loved Jake, but on the other, I couldn't ignore what was happening with Mark. The truth came out when Jake found a message on my phone from Mark. He confronted me, and I confessed everything. He was crushed. He said I had betrayed his trust in the worst way possible, and he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. Now, I'm stuck in this horrible situation. Jake broke up with me, and I haven't talked to Mark since. I feel like I've lost both of them, and I can't stop thinking about how much damage I've caused. I don't know what to do or if I even deserve forgiveness. I'm just lost. Am I a terrible person for what I did? Should I try to fix things with Jake, or is it too late? I caught my fiancé cheating on me at my bridal shower with my maid of honor, so I kicked him out and canceled the wedding. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. My fiancé, Sam, and I had been together for years. We had been through so much together, and I thought we were building something solid. We were just a few weeks away from our wedding, and I had been planning everything down to the smallest detail. My bridal shower was everything I had imagined. My closest friends, including my maid of honor Lisa, were there. The gifts, the laughter, the champagne, it was perfect. But the one thing I didn't expect was the way Sam ruined it. He showed up uninvited. It wasn't unusual for him to pop by, but something about his presence made me uncomfortable that day. He seemed distant, checking his phone every few minutes. I brushed it off, thinking he was just busy with work. But then, I saw Lisa. She was acting strange too. She was avoiding eye contact, constantly fidgeting, and looking guilty. Later, I found out why. I walked into the bathroom to grab some more snacks, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Sam and Lisa were standing by the door, close together. As I stepped closer, I overheard their conversation. "I can't wait to get away with this," Sam whispered. "We've been so careful, but I don't want to hide it anymore." My heart stopped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stepped forward, and both of them froze, staring at me with shock. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Lisa tried to play it off, saying it was nothing, but Sam didn't even deny it. "I'm sorry, but it's true," he admitted. "I've been seeing Lisa behind your back. We've been sleeping together for months." I could barely breathe. I thought I was going to faint. The betrayal from both of them was unbearable. I had been planning our wedding, buying decorations, sending invitations, and here they were, conspiring behind my back. The worst part? It was happening at my bridal shower, the one time I should have been celebrated, not humiliated. I didn't waste any time. I told Sam to leave, and I told Lisa to get out too. I walked back into the party, tears streaming down my face, and announced that the wedding was off. Everyone was shocked, but I didn't care. I couldn't marry someone who had betrayed me like that, and I certainly couldn't trust my best friend after what they'd done. I've since cut both of them out of my life completely. I don't need people like that in my circle. I learned a hard lesson that day. Trust is everything, and the people you think are closest to you can be the ones who destroy you. My husband confessed to cheating after I threw him a surprise birthday party, and I found out he was still texting his ex during the celebration. I planned the perfect surprise for Mike's birthday. I booked his favorite restaurant, invited all his friends and family, and even arranged a live band to play. He had always claimed he didn't want a big celebration, but I was determined to make it special. The night arrived, and Mike walked into a room full of people cheering for him. He kissed me, looked genuinely happy, and everything seemed perfect. But as the night wore on, I noticed him staring at his phone more than usual. He stepped away from the group often, sending quick texts and making private calls. It seemed odd, but I brushed it off until I caught a glimpse of the messages. I noticed the name Amanda on the screen. I didn't recognize it, but the way he was texting fast, almost secretively, raised my suspicions. My heart sank. As the night went on, I noticed him texting her even more, and that's when I felt a gut punch. After everyone started leaving, I seized the opportunity to pick up his phone. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the messages. They were intimate, flirtatious, and clearly more than just casual. "I miss you so much," one text said. Another read, "Can't wait to see you again this weekend." My stomach dropped. I confronted him immediately. "Who is Amanda?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated for a moment, then finally admitted the truth. "I've been seeing her. We've been meeting up for months." I felt the room close in on me. This was happening on his birthday at the celebration I planned for him. He tried to apologize, but the words were meaningless. The anger and betrayal I felt consumed me. I told him to leave. I didn't want to hear his excuses or explanations. The party I had put so much effort into had become the moment I discovered my husband had been unfaithful. I don't know how, but I found the strength to tell everyone the truth. Mike and I are no longer together, and I don't speak to him anymore. He's with Amanda now, and I'm glad she got him. I don't regret the surprise party, just the man I threw it for. My fiancé cheated on me with my sister, and I found out while planning our wedding. I thought I had it all: an amazing fiancé, a great job, and a future that looked bright. Dave and I had been together for 3 years, and our relationship was built on trust. I believed he was my soulmate, the one I would spend the rest of my life with. That was until everything came crashing down. We had just started planning our wedding, and I was excited to start the next chapter of our lives. My sister, Chloe, was my maid of honor. We were close, and I thought there was no one better to stand beside me on one of the most important days of my life. Little did I know, Chloe was hiding a terrible secret from me. It all started when I noticed that Dave and Chloe had been texting a lot more than usual. At first, I thought it was just about wedding details, but there was something about the way they acted around each other that made me uneasy. They'd always been friendly, but now they were getting way too comfortable with each other. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to pre-wedding stress. But one night, I found a message on Dave's phone when he left it unattended. It was from Chloe. "I can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you so much." My stomach dropped. I was in shock, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next day, I confronted Chloe. I asked her straight up if there was something going on between her and Dave. She hesitated, and then she broke down, admitting everything. She told me that it had started months ago, before we even began planning the wedding. They'd been seeing each other behind my back. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Chloe, my sister, the person I trusted the most, had been sleeping with my fiancé. I couldn't believe it. She was crying, apologizing, but all I could feel was rage and betrayal. I immediately called off the wedding. I told Dave to leave, and I told Chloe she wasn't welcome in my life anymore. They both begged for forgiveness, but the pain was too much. I couldn't forgive them, not for what they had done. I canceled all the wedding plans and spent weeks dealing with the aftermath. Family members took sides, but I didn't care. It was my life, and they had destroyed it. I haven't spoken to either of them since. Dave tried to reach out a few times, but I blocked him on everything. Chloe called me a few days later, saying she was sorry and wanted to make things right, but it was too late. The damage was done. I could never trust either of them again. I found out my husband was cheating on me when I accidentally overheard him on a call during our anniversary dinner. I thought we had everything. Mark and I had been married for 5 years, and though we had our ups and downs, we always worked through things. I never doubted his love for me until that night. It was our anniversary. I had planned a quiet dinner at his favorite restaurant, a place that held so many memories for us. The table was set, the candles flickered, and I had the perfect dress on. Mark seemed happy, but there was something off. He kept glancing at his phone, responding to texts, and excusing himself for calls. At first, I thought it was work. He's always been a little obsessed with staying connected, but that night, it felt different. After one of his quick calls, I decided to step outside for some fresh air. I didn't expect to hear what I did. As I was walking back toward the restaurant, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone. "I can't wait to see you tonight," he said, his voice low and hushed. "I miss you so much, babe. I'll make sure my wife isn't suspicious. I'm already planning our getaway next weekend." I froze. My heart raced, and my blood ran cold. Who was he talking to? I waited in the shadows, hoping I was mishearing things. But I wasn't. His next words made everything clear. "I love you. I can't wait to be with you." I felt sick to my stomach. It was like the world stopped spinning. I couldn't believe it. I had just heard my husband, the man I trusted, tell someone else he loved them, while he was sitting across from me at our anniversary dinner. I walked back inside, my hands trembling. Mark saw the look on my face and immediately stopped talking. He apologized, claiming it was nothing, but I already knew the truth. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I told him I knew about the affair. His face turned pale as I accused him of betraying me. He stammered, trying to deny it, but the guilt was evident in his eyes. I told him to leave, and I canceled the rest of the evening. The next few days were a blur. He begged me to forgive him, but the pain was too deep. I couldn't look at him without thinking about the lies he had told. We separated, and I haven't spoken to him since. I couldn't stay married to someone who had broken my trust so completely. He ruined our anniversary, but he also ruined our future. My husband cheated on me with my best friend while I was pregnant and hospitalized, so I kicked him out and refused to let him into the delivery room and stopped his late father's name from getting passed on. I never thought I'd be the person to tell this kind of story, but here I am. My world was turned upside down when I was 7 months pregnant and in the hospital for complications. I needed my husband, Kevin, more than ever. Instead, he betrayed me in the worst way. While I was struggling in the hospital, I noticed my best friend, Jess, was texting me nonstop. I thought it was just her checking in, but then I received a strange message from Kevin. "Can you stop texting me? I'm dealing with something." I felt uneasy, but I brushed it off. That night, I went to sleep, and when I woke up, something felt off. Kevin wasn't around much. He'd show up, but always seemed distant, glued to his phone. I didn't know why, but my gut told me something was wrong. And then Jess went quiet. I tried reaching out to her, but she ignored my messages too. That's when I decided to check Kevin's phone. The messages between him and Jess were undeniable. The flirtation, the late night texts, and finally, the bombshell. "I need you." They had been meeting up behind my back, sneaking around while I was hospitalized and vulnerable. I confronted Kevin, and at first, he denied everything. But when I showed him the texts, he admitted it. "It just happened," he said. That was the moment everything broke. My husband had cheated on me with my best friend while I was pregnant and in a hospital bed. I kicked him out. I told him to leave. He wasn't going to be part of my life anymore. I couldn't trust him, and I sure as hell didn't want him in the delivery room. No amount of apologies could fix this. And then, to add salt to the wound, I made a decision that shocked him. I wasn't going to pass on his late father's name. His family name was forever tainted in my eyes. My son would have his own name, free of betrayal and heartbreak. Kevin begged me to reconsider, but I stood firm. I didn't need him. I didn't need her either. Jess and Kevin were both cut out of my life. I didn't care what they had to say. They lost me the moment they chose to betray me. When my son was born, I was surrounded by people who loved me, not the ones who stabbed me in the back. My son will never know the truth about what happened, but I'll teach him that strength and loyalty are the most important things in life. Kevin tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored him. I don't need a man who betrayed me, especially when I have a son to raise on my own. I'm better off without him. My fiancé left me for my sister after I had a miscarriage, and I found out when they announced their engagement at my birthday party. I never imagined this would happen to me, but life has a way of slapping you in the face when you least expect it. I had been with my fiancé, Ryan, for years. We had a perfect life, or so I thought. We were planning our wedding, and I had recently found out I was pregnant. It was an unplanned surprise, but we were both thrilled. At least, that's what I believed. Things started to go downhill after I miscarried. It was a devastating experience, one I thought would pull Ryan and me closer together. But instead, I felt him pulling away. He became distant, hardly speaking to me, never showing the comfort or love I needed. I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I confided in my sister Olivia about how I was feeling. She seemed sympathetic at first, but then, she started spending more time with Ryan. At first, I didn't think much of it. They'd known each other for years, and I trusted them both. But my trust was shattered when, on my birthday, they made an announcement. Ryan and Olivia walked into the party together, holding hands, smiling like nothing was wrong. I thought it was strange that they looked so happy. But when they got to the center of the room, Ryan took the mic. "I've got something to say," he said, looking at Olivia. "I love you, Olivia, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. We're engaged." I froze. My mind went blank. I looked around the room, and all I could see were shocked faces, but none more than my mother's. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My sister, my flesh and blood, had been seeing my fiancé behind my back. She had stolen him while I was grieving, while I was broken. I ran out of the party, tears streaming down my face, heart shattered. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't process it. Ryan came after me, apologizing, but the damage was done. He told me he had fallen in love with Olivia after my miscarriage. He said he couldn't be with me anymore. I was crushed. I couldn't look at either of them. I couldn't fathom how they could betray me so badly. I kicked Ryan out of my life and told Olivia to leave too. I told her she wasn't my sister anymore. She had crossed a line I couldn't forgive. The aftermath was a blur. My family tried to reach out to me, but I couldn't face them. I cut everyone off. I moved away and started over. I've spent months focusing on healing, but it's been hard. I'll never get over the betrayal. Ryan and Olivia are still together. They're engaged and living the life I had dreamed of. But I'm doing better now. I'm learning to trust myself again, and I know I'm better off without them. Some wounds never fully heal, but I'm learning to live with the scars they left behind. My boyfriend dumped me for my cousin after I paid for his trip to Europe. We had been together for over a year. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but I genuinely believed we were building something solid. I was even thinking about the future, moving in together, maybe even getting married. But then came the trip that changed everything. My boyfriend, Mark, had always talked about going to Europe. It was his dream, but he didn't have the funds to go, and I knew he wouldn't be able to save up in time. So, for his birthday, I surprised him with the gift of a trip to Europe. I paid for the flight, the hotel, everything. I was excited to see how happy he'd be, to see the joy on his face. It wasn't just a trip, it was my way of showing him how much I cared. Mark was thrilled at first, but then, things started to shift. He became distant in the weeks leading up to the trip, barely texting or calling. He told me he was busy planning, but I could tell something wasn't right. I tried to push the doubts aside. After all, he was going on the trip of his dreams. He deserved this. The day he left for Europe, I felt a mix of emotions. I was excited for him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't know how bad it would get. While Mark was away, I noticed my cousin, Rachel, acting strange around me. She was always a little flirtatious, but nothing serious, so I didn't think much of it. But as the days passed, I noticed her messaging Mark. She'd text him on social media, sometimes late at night. She told me it was just to check on him during his trip, but I felt uncomfortable. One night, while we were chatting, I got a notification, a picture of Mark and Rachel together, holding hands. It was taken in Paris, posted to her Instagram, with the caption, "Living my best life with my favorite person." I felt the blood drain from my face. I messaged her immediately, asking if this was a joke. She didn't respond, but Mark did. His message was blunt. I'm sorry. I've been seeing Rachel while I've been here. I didn't know how to tell you. I felt like the world had collapsed. I had spent all this money, all this energy, to give him the experience of a lifetime. And this was how he repaid me, by sleeping with my cousin? I didn't even know what to say. I immediately ended things with him, and I didn't speak to either of them for weeks. My family was torn. Some took Mark's side, others took mine, but I couldn't care less. They'd both hurt me in the worst way. I called Rachel, but she didn't apologize. She said it just happened. I told her I never wanted to see her again and blocked her on everything. I also told Mark to never contact me again. That trip he took, it was supposed to be a dream for both of us. Instead, it became a nightmare. But I learned a valuable lesson. People will take as much as you're willing to give, and if they have no respect for you, they'll throw it all away. I don't regret the trip, just the person I gave it to. My husband confessed to cheating after I threw him a surprise birthday party, and I found out he was still texting his ex during the celebration. I planned the perfect surprise for Mike's birthday. I booked his favorite restaurant, invited all his friends and family, and even arranged a live band to play. He had always claimed he didn't want a big celebration, but I was determined to make it special. The night arrived, and Mike walked into a room full of people cheering for him. He kissed me, looked genuinely happy, and everything seemed perfect. But as the night wore on, I noticed him staring at his phone more than usual. He stepped away from the group often, sending quick texts and making private calls. It seemed odd, but I brushed it off until I caught a glimpse of the messages. I noticed the name Amanda on the screen. I didn't recognize it, but the way he was texting fast, almost secretively, raised my suspicions. My heart sank. As the night went on, I noticed him texting her even more, and that's when I felt a gut punch. After everyone started leaving, I seized the opportunity to pick up his phone. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the messages. They were intimate, flirtatious, and clearly more than just casual. I miss you so much, one text said. Another read, can't wait to see you again this weekend. My stomach dropped. I confronted him immediately. Who is Amanda? I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated for a moment, then finally admitted the truth. I've been seeing her. We've been meeting up for months. I felt the room close in on me. This was happening on his birthday at the celebration I planned for him. He tried to apologize, but the words were meaningless. The anger and betrayal I felt consumed me. I told him to leave. I didn't want to hear his excuses or explanations. The party I had put so much effort into had become the moment I discovered my husband had been unfaithful. I don't know how, but I found the strength to tell everyone the truth. Mike and I are no longer together, and I don't speak to him anymore. He's with Amanda now, and I'm glad she got him. I don't regret the surprise party, just the man I threw it for. My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend, and when I found out, I sent them both a letter exposing their affair. To all our mutual friends at our engagement party. I never imagined I would be in this situation, but life had other plans. I'd been with Alex for 3 years. We'd talked about getting married, and everything seemed perfect. Our engagement party was supposed to be a celebration, but it ended up being a nightmare. It started with little things. Alex would disappear for hours, always saying he was out with the guys. I shrugged it off, but then something fell off with Sarah, my best friend. She started acting weird around me, avoiding eye contact, and getting nervous when I asked about her plans. One night, while Alex was in the shower, I decided to look at his phone. The moment I saw the messages between him and Sarah, I felt the world stop. It was clear they had been seeing each other behind my back. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again tonight. And the worst one, I love you. I'm done with her. My heart sank. My best friend and my boyfriend had been betraying me for months, and I had no idea. I confronted Alex the next day, and he tried to deny it. But the evidence was too much. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said. But I love her. Sarah showed up later, trying to apologize, but I couldn't even look at her. I was done with both of them. I grabbed my phone and wrote a letter to all our friends, telling them everything. I explained the affair, the lies, the betrayal. The night of the engagement party, I sent it. Everyone started reading the message as they walked in. Faces dropped, and the air became thick with shock. I felt a weird sense of satisfaction. They deserved to be exposed. Alex begged me to take him back, but I refused. I told him to leave, and when Sarah tried to justify her actions, I told her she wasn't my friend anymore. The fallout was intense. Some people took sides, some stayed silent, but in the end, I felt like I had done the right thing. They had no right to betray me. Now, I'm focusing on myself. I don't need people like that in my life. I've learned a hard lesson about trust, but I'm stronger now, and I know I'll never let anyone take advantage of me again. My husband was working late every night until I found the truth. For the past few months, my husband, Tom, had been staying late at the office. He's always been dedicated to his job, but this felt different. His late nights turned into work weekends, and suddenly, he couldn't make time for me anymore. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was being paranoid, but something in me knew something was wrong. One night, I decided to take a chance and show up at his office. I thought I could surprise him with dinner, and maybe we could spend some time together. But when I arrived, the lights were off, and his car wasn't in the parking lot. I checked my phone, and he'd texted me that he was working late and would be home soon. That's when I started to dig. I tracked his location using a phone app we had, and to my shock, he wasn't at work at all. He was at a fancy hotel across town. My heart sank. I couldn't believe it. I drove to the hotel, my hands trembling. I parked across the street and waited. Not long after, I saw Tom and a woman walking out of the hotel. She had her arm around him, and he was laughing. It wasn't just an office colleague, it was someone he'd been seeing behind my back. I didn't say anything at first. I just left. The next day, I confronted him with the hotel receipt I had found in his jacket pocket. Tom tried to deny it at first, claiming it was a business meeting, but I told him I knew everything. I wasn't angry, I was just heartbroken. He begged me to forgive him, saying it was a one-time mistake, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I filed for divorce the following week, and Tom has been trying to win me back ever since. But there's no going back from this. The man I thought I knew is gone. I'm better off without him. I found out my fiancé was texting his ex while we were planning our wedding. We were just a month away from our wedding, and I thought everything was perfect. Evan and I had been together for 3 years, and we had spent the last few months planning our dream wedding. He was always attentive, kind, and seemed to be completely invested in our future, at least. That's what I thought. It all started when I borrowed his phone to make a quick call. As I scrolled through his messages, I noticed something strange. He had a conversation going with his ex, Sarah. I thought it was weird, but maybe they were just catching up. I didn't think too much of it at first, but then I started noticing the texts were more frequent, and they seemed to be getting more personal. I miss the way we used to be, one of the messages read. Another one said, I still think about you sometimes. I hope you're doing okay. I felt a pit in my stomach. I decided to confront him about it that night. When I asked him why he was still texting his ex, he got defensive. It's nothing, just some old messages, he said. But the longer I looked at him, the more I realized I wasn't buying it. I pressed him harder, asking if there was more to it, and he finally admitted that they had been in touch frequently and had been talking about getting together. I was crushed. Here I was, planning our wedding, thinking we were building a life together, and he was secretly trying to reconnect with someone else. The worst part, he said, I wasn't sure about us anymore. I didn't give him a second chance. I called off the wedding that night and moved out the next day. Evan begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. He had already shown me who he truly was. I'm still hurt, but I'm thankful I found out before I married him. The lesson? Trust your gut, it's never wrong. My best friend hooked up with my boyfriend, and I found out the hard way. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Matt, my boyfriend of 2 years, and I had the kind of relationship people envied. We were close, loved each other deeply, and spent all our free time together. Sarah, my best friend since childhood, was always part of the picture. They got along great, and I never thought twice about it. But everything changed one night when I came home early from a work trip. I was excited to surprise Matt, so I let myself in with the spare key he'd given me. The moment I opened the door, I heard laughter coming from the living room. At first, I thought nothing of it. Matt had friends over. But when I stepped into the room, my heart dropped. There they were, Matt and Sarah, sitting on the couch, tangled up, laughing and holding hands. It wasn't innocent. They were way too comfortable with each other. And then I saw it. Sarah's shirt was half off, and Matt's hand was dangerously close to her waist. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. They didn't notice me at first. When they finally looked up, Their faces went pale. I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "What's going on?" Sarah stammered, but Matt quickly stood up and said, "It's not what it looks like." I wasn't sure what hurt more, seeing my boyfriend and best friend together, or hearing the excuses they tried to make. They both apologized, but I could tell by their eyes they were guilty. Sarah said it was a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything. But I wasn't stupid. I told them both to leave. I didn't need an explanation or an apology. I just needed them gone. It's been a few weeks since then, and I've cut both of them out of my life. I haven't spoken to Sarah or Matt since that night. It feels surreal, but I'm better off without them. The betrayal is something I'll never forget.
I found out my girlfriend was cheating with my best friend, and I was the last to know. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. Rachel and I had been together for over a year. She was beautiful, smart, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. She had this way of making me feel like the luckiest guy in the world. Then there was Chris, my best friend since high school. We'd been through everything together. Girls, parties, college. Nothing ever came between us. But recently, Rachel had been acting off. She was distant, canceling plans last minute, and sometimes she'd text me late at night. But the conversation always seemed a little too brief. I chalked it up to her being busy, or maybe even stressed. But when I found a text on her phone that wasn't meant for me, I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was a message from Chris that simply said, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Babe, just tell him you're busy. We'll figure it out." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My mind was racing. How could this be happening? I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I waited until the next day and asked Rachel about it. She denied everything, said I was overthinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to do some digging. I checked her phone again when she went to take a shower and found more texts, more flirtations, pictures, and even plans for a secret meetup. All of it was with Chris. I called Chris. He picked up, his voice calm as ever. "What's up, man?" I couldn't keep it together anymore. "You've been sleeping with my girlfriend, haven't you?" There was a long pause. Then he admitted it. "Yeah, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." I hung up before he could say more. When Rachel came out of the shower, I didn't say anything. I just showed her the texts. The color drained from her face. She tried to apologize, told me it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But I didn't want to hear it. She had betrayed me with the one person I thought I could trust. I packed my things and left that night. I never spoke to Chris or Rachel again. The betrayal stings, but I learned the hard way that some people, no matter how close you think you are to them, will disappoint you. I'm moving on, stronger and wiser, but I'll never forget how easily they both turned their backs on me.